You are in for a treat. So at the time of recording, in order to build and run a CrewAI application, we have to make sure Python is installed on our machine, specifically a version between 3.10 and 3.13, as outlined in the CrewAI documentation. We're going to start this journey by installing a tool called PyEnv, which will allow us to easily switch between Python versions in case we don't have the right version of Python installed. Because I'm on a Mac, I'm going to install PyEnv using Homebrew. FYI, PyEnv is supported on Windows and Linux as well. But as a heads up, I'm going to be showing you how all this stuff works regarding AgentOps and CrewAI on my Mac environment. So you will be able to pick things up if you're a Windows and Linux user, but you know the deal. Here is how we use PyEnv. So this command will show us whichever version of PyEnv was installed. This command will show us all of the different Python versions that have been downloaded onto our machine. And you can see that by default on our machine, we have Python 3.13. This command allows us to install or download another version of Python if it's not listed. For example, if we wanted Python 3.10, we could download it like so. And if you wanted to switch the Python version across your entire system, you would type this global option, but we're going to go with this one. The local option will switch the Python version in the current folder and all subfolders of the current folder. So if you run it and then see what Python version is now configured in our shell, you can see that it's switched to 3.12. Now what we finna do is create a folder called example1 inside of the folder where we switch Python versions. And after we have that folder created, let's cd into it and open it with our code editor of choice. I'll be using VS Code. Now that we have our project folder open in VS Code, let's pop open a terminal and configure a virtual environment. If you're new to this virtual environment stuff, all we're doing here is configuring Python to install any third-party Python packages into this folder where we're doing our work. If we were to install some third-party Python package somewhere else, theoretically, it could cause some side effect. So that's all we're doing here. We're just configuring Python to install any third-party Python packages into this folder, like for example, UV. And now that we have UV installed, clear this and run the UV init command to scaffold out a Python project. And UV gives us a little hello script to test everything's working, and that looks good. And I personally like to remove this script because we won't be needing it. And now that we have our virtual environment set up, let's install the following Python packages. As these will be all the packages we need for example 1, you can now create a file called main.py and copy in the following code. And we should not be seeing any import errors. And that looks good. If we look closely at this code, you can see we are building a little markdown validator assistant, aka we're building an agent with one tool, with that one tool being a tool that reads in a markdown file and reports to us if it has any syntax errors. And then after this tool reports the syntax errors back to the agent will then read them out to us or print them out to us in a more friendly manner. And if you look even closer, you can see that we're not using OpenAI, we're not using Claude, but we're using Gemma 2. Gemma 2 is a free open source model that was released by Google. And because we're running a local model ourselves, we're going to run it with Ollama. So Ollama is a very easy to use tool that can be downloaded at ollama.com. All you have to do is come over here and download the appropriate version for your machine, and you should be good to go. And the way that we use Ollama is by launching it just like we would launch any other application. And when Ollama is running, you should see this llama icon in your top menu bar. And the way that we pull or download specific models offered by Ollama is by entering this command, Ollama pull, and then the model ID. And as that downloads, let's come back over to the Ollama site and browse some of the models. And you can see here that Ollama offers hundreds of different models. And theoretically, you can run any of them, assuming you have enough RAM or VRAM. So on my machine, I have about 16 gigs of RAM. So I'm able to run up to about 10 to 12 billion parameter models. That's what you're seeing with these numbers here. This tells you how many parameters are in each AI model. A rough way of thinking about parameters is it's kind of like how many brain cells the AI has. So anyways, if you want to run some of these larger models, you're probably going to have to invest in some hardware, like buying some NVIDIA chips, etc. But anyways, we're running a very small model. And after it's downloaded, we can run our CrewAI application and it should work. Now that Gemma 2 has been downloaded, let's run our CrewAI application and see how well Gemma 2 does at processing this markdown file that we have outlined here. So you can see that nothing is in this markdown file at the moment. So what we're going to do is copy in this content, which is a summary of all the steps we've taken up till this point. And I've inserted a few markdown syntax errors to see if our application picks it up. So let's run our application. Okay, so let's see if Gemma 2 is hallucinating or not. So it's saying fix line 9, column 5. It says you're using a bare URL, and that's right. And the next syntax error being reported is line 25. And it's saying add blank lines around the heading. So you can see that each heading is surrounded by spaces, right? But this one is not. So if we insert space here, that should be fixed. And the last reported error is line 44. And because we shifted the code down after line 26, where we added the space, this is now on line 45, and it's saying to end the markdown file with a new line character. So let's rerun our markdown validator assistant, and hopefully all of the syntax errors should be fixed. Now let's add in AgentOps for monitoring. To use AgentOps, come over to app.agentops.ai and sign up if you haven't already. And come over to the API keys section and copy one of the API keys associated with one of the projects in your account. And let's come back to our project folder and add a .env file. And in this .env file, let's add an entry that reads in all caps, AgentOps underscore API underscore key equals, and then paste in the API key that you copied. Now that our API key is set up, let's install AgentOps like so, and come over to the main.py script and add the following lines. At the top, let's import our environment variables. And on line 8, let's import AgentOps and initialize it as well with this auto start session parameter to be false. This will allow us to explicitly specify when we want AgentOps to start and stop tracking our code, which I like. And let's replace lines 73 to 75 with the following code that will wrap our call in a try except clause and AgentOps.start session and AgentOps.end session function, as well as mark the session as either successful or failed, depending on the outcome. And now let's run our little CrewAI application again and see what happens. Here you can see AgentOps has printed out a link when it started tracking our application and a link when it stopped tracking our application. And if we open this link, you can see that a bunch of metadata about our session has been recorded to the AgentOps console. Here we can see the tool call to the Markdown validation tool, and we can also see the model that was used as well as all of the completion tokens. Okay, so that looked like it worked.